This single August planting filled one harvest basket in September and a completely different basket in October. The first basket held tender seedlings, baby leaves, and small green shoots. The second held full roots, swollen stems, larger leaves, and, where the season allowed it, pea pods. Nothing in that garden had been planted twice. The difference came from knowing what could be taken early, what had to stay in the soil, and when the first harvest needed to stop. Most gardeners look at a crowded row of young vegetables and see a problem. Beet seedlings are touching, turnips are packed together, radishes are forming a green carpet. Bok choy, tatsoi, lettuce, and spinach are growing closer than the mature plants will ever tolerate. The usual response is to pull the extras, drop them beside the bed, and move on. But that pile of tiny plants may be the first harvest of your fall garden. The important word is may. Not every seedling is worth eating, not every plant should be cut the same way, and not every August garden in the United States follows the same calendar. Some of these vegetables give you 2 harvests from the same living plant. Others give you edible thinnings first and a mature crop from the strongest plants you leave behind. A third group can give you 1 edible part early and a completely different edible part later. The promise is not that every individual plant performs the same trick. The promise is that one sowing can produce 2 useful harvest stages when it is managed carefully. That distinction matters because the first basket can either help the second basket or quietly destroy it. Thinning a crowded radish row can improve the roots that remain. Removing too many beet leaves can slow the roots you hope to harvest. Taking a few outer kale leaves can encourage a long picking season. Cutting through the tight center of bok choy can end the growth you wanted to continue. With peas, a few tender shoots may be possible, but cutting the main growing tips too aggressively can reduce the plant's ability to climb, flower, and form pods. So, before we name the first vegetable, picture one simple goal. You want to harvest what the plant can spare, protect what it needs to keep growing, and leave enough time for the second stage to develop. That rule will guide every crop in this video. There are 3 ways one August sowing can create 2 harvests. The first is edible thinning. You sow enough seed to get a strong stand. Then, remove crowded seedlings so the best plants have room. The removed seedlings become food instead of waste. This works especially well with beets, turnips, radishes, kohlrabi, and green onions. The first harvest comes from the plants that would have been removed anyway. The second comes from the plants that now have better spacing. The second method is selective leaf harvesting. Here you do not remove the whole plant. You take the largest outer leaves and protect the small, active leaves in the center. Bok choy, tatsoi, mizuna, kale, collards, Swiss chard, mustard greens, leaf lettuce, and spinach can all fit this method, but they do not all tolerate the same amount of cutting. A mature kale plant and a tiny lettuce seedling do not have the same reserve of leaves. A plant under cool, moist conditions can recover more easily than one wilting in late summer heat. The method is the same in principle, but the intensity must change. The third method is dual-purpose harvesting. You take 1 edible part early and wait for another later. Beet greens can come before beet roots. Turnip greens can come before turnip roots. Tender kohlrabi leaves can come before the swollen stem. Pea thinnings or a very limited number of shoots can come before pods. This method creates the most dramatic second basket, but it also creates the greatest temptation to take too much from the first. One more point separates this strategy from ordinary succession planting. You are not sowing a second batch 2 weeks later. Succession planting is useful, but this is different. Here, one sowing is being managed through 2 harvest stages. The first stage must be chosen in a way that creates space, protects the growing point, or leaves enough leaf area for the crop to continue. Now we can begin with the vegetables where the first harvest is hidden in the thinning. And the first one shows why a crowded row can be both a problem and an opportunity. Beets often emerge in clusters, which surprises new gardeners who expect one seed to mean one seedling. What looks like a single beet seed is commonly a dried fruit structure that can produce more than one sprout. That is why a row that seemed carefully spaced at sowing time may soon contain pairs or small groups of seedlings pressed together. The first decision is not which leaves to harvest. It is which plants deserve the space. Look for the strongest, most upright seedling in each crowded spot. If the neighboring seedlings are still small and the soil is loose, you may be able to ease them out carefully. But when roots are already tangled, pulling can disturb the beet you want to keep. In that situation, use clean scissors to cut the extra seedlings at soil level. You still receive the tender tops, and the chosen beet remains undisturbed. Those young beet leaves can be added to salads when they are tender, or cooked like other greens as they become larger. The tiny root may also be edible, but the real value of the first harvest is the greens and the improved spacing left behind. Once the row has been thinned, resist the urge to treat every new leaf as a bonus harvest. The remaining leaves are building the root below the soil. If your main goal is a full beet root, take only occasional outer leaves from vigorous plants and leave most of the canopy intact. Watch the plant rather than following a rigid number. A beet with several strong leaves and active new growth can spare more than a newly established seedling. A beet drooping in heat or recovering from insect damage should not be harvested for greens at all. Water it, protect it, and allow it to rebuild. The second basket depends on healthy leaves, converting light into the energy stored in the root. The two-stage result is easy to understand. First, you gather the seedlings that had to be removed, and perhaps a limited number of tender leaves. Later, you lift the spaced beets for their roots. The mistake is trying to make the first basket too large. If you strip the plants repeatedly, the leaves may keep appearing, but the roots may remain smaller than you expected. Turnips follow a similar pattern, but they deserve their own rules, because many gardeners value the greens as much as the roots. A thick stand of turnip seedlings may look productive, yet crowded roots cannot expand well. Early thinning creates the first harvest and gives the chosen plants a chance to form properly. Select the strongest seedlings and create the spacing recommended for the variety you planted. If the roots are intertwined, cut the extras rather than pulling. Wash the thinnings well, because soil often clings around the base of young brassica plants. Tender turnip greens can be cooked, added to soups, or mixed with milder leaves. They are not a waste product. They are a legitimate first crop. The conflict begins when you continue taking leaves from the plants reserved for roots. Turnips can produce new foliage, but every heavy harvest asks the plant to replace leaf tissue before it can invest fully in the root. If you mainly want greens, you can manage the crop for repeated leaf picking. If you mainly want roots, keep the green harvest modest. Decide which second basket matters more before you begin cutting. Take older, outer leaves from vigorous plants and leave the central growth untouched. Avoid harvesting during the hottest part of the day or when the plants are wilted. A stressed plant is already using its resources to recover. Removing leaves at that moment adds another demand. After a modest picking, water is needed and give the plant time to produce fresh growth before taking more. The first turnip harvest can therefore be the crowded seedlings and a few tender greens. The second can be the roots, with additional leaves taken at final harvest. The hidden lesson is that the tops are not merely attached to the crop, they are the machinery that builds it. Radishes make the value of thinning even more obvious. They grow quickly, but speed does not rescue them from crowding. When too many radishes compete in one narrow row, the leaves may look lush, while the roots remain thin, misshapen, or slow to swell. Early thinning is not optional if you want an even root harvest. Young radish seedlings and tender tops are edible. Their flavor can be peppery, and older leaves may feel rougher, so the first thinning is often the most pleasant stage for using them fresh. Cut or pull the extras while they are still small. Then leave the best seedlings evenly distributed. If you delay because you hate sacrificing plants, you do not save the crop. You force many plants to compete for the space that only a few can use well. Radishes differ from beets and turnips in one important way. They are usually grown for a relatively fast root harvest, so the first crop should come mainly from thinning, not from repeatedly stripping leaves off the plants you keep. A few damaged or outer leaves may be removed, but the goal is to preserve a healthy top while the root swells. Check the row after thinning. Leaves should no longer completely overlap, and each plant should have access to light. Keep moisture reasonably even, because rapid swings between dry and wet conditions can stress the roots. Mulch can help where August soil dries quickly, but do not bury tiny seedlings under a heavy layer. The young plants still need air and light around their crowns. Your first radish basket may hold small seedlings, peppery tops, and perhaps a few tiny roots. The second holds the mature radishes from the plants you protected. This is one of the clearest examples of a first harvest that directly improves the second. Kohlrabi changes the shape of the payoff. The round part you harvest later is not a root buried underground. It is a swollen stem that develops above the soil surface. That stem needs room, healthy leaves, and steady growth. Crowded kohlrabi may stay narrow, lean into neighboring plants, or form smaller stems. As the seedlings develop, thin them so each chosen plant has the space listed for the variety. The removed seedlings can be used while tender, and young kohlrabi leaves are edible. Their flavor and texture resemble other members of the cabbage family. But again, do not confuse edible with unlimited. The leaves on the plants you keep are powering the swollen stem. If you want the strongest second harvest, let the remaining kohlrabi establish a broad, healthy set of leaves. You can take an occasional outer leaf once the plant is vigorous, especially if a leaf is shading another crop or is likely to touch the soil. Leave the inner leaves and the active top alone. Avoid a schedule that removes leaves faster than the plant replaces them. Kohlrabi also gives you a useful visual signal. As the stem begins to swell above the soil, you can see whether the plant is progressing. If the top looks thin and the stem is not enlarging, check spacing, moisture, light, and insect damage before harvesting more leaves. The first basket may contain thinnings and a few greens. The second contains the crisp, swollen stems. The mistake is trying to make the leafy harvest so generous that the stem never reaches its potential. Green onions offer a more flexible version of edible thinning. They can be sown relatively close and harvested progressively. Instead of thinning the whole row to its final spacing at once, you can remove selected plants as they reach a useful size. Every plant you pull becomes part of the first harvest, and the neighboring onions gain space. Work along the row rather than grabbing random clusters. Remove one plant from between two that you want to keep, then move farther down before taking another. This reduces sudden gaps and limits disturbance. If the soil is dry and firm, water beforehand so the roots release more easily, hold near the base and lift gently. If plants are tightly tangled, a narrow tool can help loosen the soil without tearing the roots of the onions beside them. You may also cut a small amount of green foliage from established plants, but repeated severe cutting is not the same as thinning. Leaves are needed for continued growth. If you want the remaining onions to become thicker and stronger, do not shear the entire row down to the soil. Take a few outer green leaves, or harvest whole plants selectively, then leave the rest to grow. Green onions make the two baskets feel almost continuous rather than separate. The first contains slender plants pulled from crowded spaces. The second contains larger onions that benefited from the room. This is a practical strategy for containers because you do not need to decide the final number of plants on one day. You can let dinner gradually create the spacing. By now, the first basket contains beet tops, turnip thinnings, young radish greens, tender kohlrabi seedlings, and slender green onions. More importantly, the garden left behind is less crowded. Light reaches lower leaves, air moves more easily. Roots have more soil to explore. In this first group, harvesting usually improves the main crop because you are removing competition. But the rules are about to change. With the next vegetables, you will often leave every plant in place and remove individual leaves. That sounds gentler, yet it can be more dangerous. A careless cut into the living center can stop new growth, and an enthusiastic harvest can take away more leaf area than a young plant can replace. The next basket is filled one leaf at a time. Bok choy looks like a simple plant to harvest because its leaves form a compact cluster, but that compact shape hides the part you must protect. New leaves emerge from the center. If you slice across the entire crown, you may receive one satisfying harvest, but you have ended the two-stage plan. For a second stage, work from the outside. Wait until the plant has several open outer leaves and a firm center. Choose one or two of the largest outer leaves from a vigorous plant. Follow each leaf stalk down toward the base and cut it cleanly without pushing the blade into the tight middle. The small folded leaves in the center are not part of the first basket. They are the future plant. Bok choy can also contribute edible thinnings. When seedlings are crowded, remove weaker plants early and use them whole while tender. This is often safer than repeatedly taking leaves from very small plants. Once the remaining bok choy has enough space, let it establish before beginning selective harvests. Heat changes the calculation. In warm August conditions, bok choy may grow unevenly, wilt during the afternoon, or move toward premature flowering. Do not harvest a stressed plant merely because the outer leaves are large enough to eat. Water consistently, provide temporary afternoon protection where necessary, and harvest during a cool part of the day. A crisp, hydrated plant recovers more effectively than one already struggling. The first bok choy basket can hold thinnings and a few open outer leaves. The second can hold a larger plant or additional mature leaves. The error is cutting down through the center as though every bok choy were being harvested once and finished. Tatsoi follows the same general principle, but its low rosette creates a different challenge. The leaves spread close to the soil, where they can trap moisture, collect grit, and attract chewing pests. This makes the outer leaves tempting to remove, and sometimes removing damaged leaves is useful. Still, the flat center must remain intact. Look down into the rosette before you cut. Identify the smallest leaves clustered in the middle. Then choose older leaves from the outside ring, especially those that are large enough to use or are beginning to touch the soil. Cut one leaf at a time. Do not grab the plant and slice across the whole base if your goal is regrowth. Tatsoi thinnings can also become the first harvest. When plants are too close to form broad rosettes, remove selected seedlings and leave the strongest at proper spacing. This gives you tender greens and prevents the remaining plants from overlapping too early. Because tatsoi stays low, check under the leaves after every harvest. Look for insect feeding, trapped debris, and signs of decay near the soil. A two-stage harvest is only valuable when the center remains healthy. If the plant is heavily damaged, it may be better to remove the weakest one and protect the neighboring plants rather than repeatedly taking leaves from a declining crown. Mizuna brings a lighter, more open form to the garden. Its finely divided leaves can be harvested young for salads or allowed to grow larger for cooking. It often responds well to selective cutting, but the safest technique for a beginner is still to harvest from the outside and preserve the central growth. Start with thinnings if the seedlings form a dense line. Those small plants can be used fresh. On the remaining plants, take the longest outer leaves by following their stems to the base. Leave the compact, younger leaves in the center. Mizuna may appear to recover quickly, but that does not mean it is unaffected by repeated heavy cutting. Give it time to replace what you removed. Some gardeners cut a stand of mizuna above the crown and allow it to regrow. That can work when the cutting height is correct and the plants are healthy, but it requires knowing exactly where the active growing tissue remains. For an audio-first beginner guide, individual outer leaf harvests are easier to describe and harder to get wrong. They also let you observe each plant and adjust the amount taken. Mizuna can become bitterer or tougher as conditions become stressful, and insect damage can reduce the useful leaf area. If a plant already has only a few undamaged leaves, do not remove all of them for the first basket. Preserve enough healthy foliage to support new growth. The first harvest can be baby leaves and thinnings. The second can be a fuller, more mature canopy. Kale makes selective harvesting feel natural because the plant clearly builds new leaves from its upper center, while older leaves hang lower on the stalk. Begin at the bottom. Choose leaves that are full-sized, healthy, and no longer part of the tight, growing tip. Hold the leaf stem near the main stalk and cut cleanly. Avoid pulling downward hard enough to strip tissue from the stem. The top cluster is the engine of future growth. Leave it untouched, Also leave enough middle leaves to keep the plant productive. A kale stem with only a small tuft at the top may survive, but survival is not the same as strong production. The goal is a steady exchange. A few mature leaves leave the plant, and new leaves continue to expand above them. Young kale seedlings can also be thinned and eaten, but once you have selected the permanent plants, spacing becomes part of the long harvest plan. Kale that is crowded may stretch, lose lower leaves, and hold moisture between plants. Give each plant the room required for the variety and container size. The best time to harvest is when the leaves are firm rather than wilted. If the plant is drooping in afternoon heat, wait until it has recovered. Remove heavily damaged or yellowing leaves, but do not count those as proof that the plant can tolerate a large edible harvest at the same time. A plant dealing with caterpillars, flea beetles, or heat stress needs more of its healthy foliage, not less. The first kale harvest can begin with thinnings and lower leaves. The second is not necessarily one final cut. It may be a continuing series of larger leaves as cooler weather encourages steady growth. That makes kale one of the strongest examples of harvesting twice from the same plant, provided the top remains protected. Collards grow according to a similar pattern, but their broad leaves can tempt gardeners to take too much at once. A single collard leaf may look like a meal, and several can fill a basket quickly. Yet a small collard plant with only a few leaves cannot lose the same amount as a mature plant with a tall stem and an active crown. Begin with the lowest mature leaves. Cut them close to the main stem without damaging the stem itself. Leave the upper leaves and the central growing point untouched. After harvesting, look at the plant. It should still appear leafy and capable of capturing light, not bare and exhausted. Collard thinnings can be eaten when young, and thinning is especially important because mature plants spread widely. In a raised bed, a row that looks comfortably spaced in August may become crowded later. Follow the final spacing for the variety, rather than judging only by the size of the seedlings today. Heat, insects, and water stress determine how quickly a collard can replace harvested leaves. If growth has paused, pause your harvesting too. The calendar should not control the scissors. The plant should. When new leaves are expanding steadily, you can resume taking older outer leaves. The first collard basket may hold tender thinnings and a limited number of lower leaves. The second can hold larger leaves from the same plants over a longer period. The mistake is treating a young collard like a mature one, because its leaves already look large. Swiss chard offers one of the clearest demonstrations of a living center. Its leaves rise on individual stalks from a central crown near the soil. New stalks emerge from the middle while older stalks stand around the outside. To harvest without ending growth, remove the outer stalks, one at a time. Use a clean knife or scissors and cut the stalk near its base. Do not stab into the crown. Do not twist so aggressively that the outer stalk tears a piece of the crown away. Work around the plant rather than harvesting everything from one side, especially if the plant is growing in a windy location where uneven weight can pull it off balance. Swiss chard can be harvested at baby size, but allow the permanent plants to establish before taking a heavy crop. Young leaves are tender, while larger leaves and colorful stalks are useful for cooking. This gives you two distinct eating stages, even when the harvest comes from the same plant. Chard handles warmth better than spinach, but it is not immune to stress. Leaves can wilt, edges can scorch, and growth can slow in a small, hot container. Deep, consistent watering and a mulch layer can help moderate the root zone. If the plant is wilting every afternoon, the solution is not to harvest more leaves so it has less to support. The solution is to correct the stress. A properly harvested chard plant should still have a strong center and several working leaves. The first basket may contain baby leaves or a few outer stalks. The second can contain larger stalks and leaves produced after the center continues growing. Mustard greens bring speed and strong flavor, making them excellent for an early fall basket. Crowded seedlings can be thinned and used young, when the flavor is often milder and the texture more tender. The permanent plants can then be managed by taking outer leaves and preserving the center. Mustard leaves can quickly show insect damage, especially from small chewing pests. That creates an important decision. Remove leaves that are badly damaged or lying against the soil, but do not strip the plant simply because the remaining perfect leaves look attractive. Healthy leaf area is still needed for recovery. Harvest during a cool part of the day and use clean cuts. Mustard can grow rapidly in favorable weather, but heat can intensify flavor and increase stress. As conditions cool, the plants may produce better quality leaves. This means the first harvest may be a modest collection of thinnings, while the second becomes a larger picking after the weather improves. The central rule remains the same. Take mature outer leaves. Leave the young inner leaves. If a plant is small, let it build. If a plant has been heavily attacked, help it recover. The first basket should not be filled by emptying the plant. Leaf lettuce seems almost designed for two-stage harvesting, but only when you choose the right type and protect the center. Loose leaf varieties are generally more suitable for repeated outer leaf picking than lettuces grown mainly to form a tight head. Even with leaf lettuce, the growing point sits low in the center and can be damaged by a careless cut. Begin with thinning. Lettuce seeds are tiny, and a good stand often emerges closer than mature plants should remain. Remove extra seedlings while tender. If roots are interwoven, cut some at soil level rather than pulling. This prevents the chosen plants from being lifted or loosened. After the plants establish, take individual outer leaves. Choose leaves that are large enough to use but still crisp. Follow the leaf toward the base and remove it without cutting across the center. Leave several active leaves and the small inner cluster. The plant should look open but still healthy after harvest. Time of day matters. Lettuce harvested while cool and hydrated stays crisper, and the plant experiences less immediate stress. Avoid cutting leaves from wilted plants in the hottest part of the afternoon. Water the soil, allow the plant to recover, and harvest later. August heat can affect lettuce before there is anything to harvest. Warm soil may reduce or delay germination, and hot conditions can encourage rapid bolting or bitter leaves. Gardeners in cooler regions may need to sow early enough to beat the approaching frost. Gardeners in hot regions may need to wait for a cooler window, use temporary shade, or start seed in a protected place. The word August is a seasonal guide, not a universal planting date. The first lettuce basket can contain thinnings and baby outer leaves. The second can contain larger leaves from the same plants. But the second harvest depends on more than correct cutting. It also depends on whether the young plants survive the heat and establish before the season changes. At this point, a pattern should be clear. Bok choy and tatsoi protect a compact center. Mizuna protects a cluster of young leaves. Kale and collards protect the upper growing point. Swiss chard protects the crown. Mustard and leaf lettuce protect the inner growth. The exact shape changes, but the principle does not. Now comes the trade-off that many list videos miss. Thinning whole seedlings usually helps the plants left behind because it removes competition. Leaf harvesting is different. Every leaf in your basket is also a leaf the plant can no longer use to build roots, stems, or more foliage. A selective harvest can be sustainable. A severe harvest can delay the second stage. Use the plant's condition as your limit. If new leaves are expanding, color is strong, moisture is steady, and insect damage is low, the plant can usually spare a modest outer harvest. If growth has stopped, leaves are limp, or the remaining foliage is damaged, stop cutting. The first basket is optional. The living center is not. The next vegetable can be one of the best baby leaf crops in cool weather, but it exposes another problem. Sometimes your scissors are not the greatest threat to the second harvest. Sometimes, the August soil prevents the first seedling from appearing at all. Spinach deserves a place in this plan because it can provide a tender baby harvest and continue producing larger leaves as the weather cools. But it also deserves the strongest warning about timing. Spinach prefers cool conditions, and hot soil can make germination slow, uneven, or unsuccessful. A packet may say that spinach is suitable for fall, yet the soil in an exposed August bed may still be far warmer than the seed prefers. This is where a calendar date becomes less useful than local conditions. A gardener in a cooler northern region may need to sow early enough for the plants to establish before hard cold arrives. A gardener in a hot southern region may need to wait until later, when the soil and nights begin to cool. Gardeners between those extremes must balance both risks. Sow too early, and the seed struggles in heat. Sow too late, and the plants may not build enough growth before short days slow them down. Begin with your average first frost date. Then read the days to maturity information for the specific variety. Do not treat that number as a promise. Fall growth often slows as daylight decreases and temperatures fall. Add a reasonable cushion rather than counting backward to the last possible day. Then compare that calendar with the temperature and condition of the planting site. If the bed is still baking in full afternoon sun, the date alone does not make it ready. You can improve the odds by choosing a cooler location, using light temporary shade, and keeping the seed zone evenly moist. The surface must not be allowed to dry repeatedly during germination. A thin mulch placed after emergence can help moderate moisture, but avoid burying the tiny seedlings. Some gardeners start spinach in a protected area and transplant carefully, while others pre-chill or pre-sprout seed. The exact method matters less than the principle. Reduce heat stress and maintain moisture without waterlogging the soil. Once spinach emerges, thinning creates the first possible harvest. Remove crowded seedlings while they are still tender and leave the strongest plants with enough space. If pulling threatens the roots beside them, cut the extras at soil level. Those small leaves can go directly into the first basket. After the permanent plants establish, selective harvesting begins. Take 1 or 2 larger outer leaves from healthy plants and leave the compact center intact. Spinach grows from that low central point. A cut across the crown can end the plant. A severe harvest from a tiny plant can leave too little foliage for recovery. Start modestly and watch the response. Cooler weather may improve leaf quality and support continued growth, but moisture still matters. Spinach has shallow roots and can suffer when the upper soil dries. Keep water consistent, especially in containers. At the same time, avoid keeping the leaves and crown constantly wet in stagnant air. Good spacing and morning watering help the foliage dry while the roots remain supplied. The first spinach basket may contain thinnings and baby outer leaves. The second may contain larger leaves from the plants that continued growing into cooler weather. In a favorable climate, the harvest period may extend longer. In a short season, the baby stage may be the main payoff. Both outcomes are useful, but only if the title's promise is adjusted to the reality of the location. Leaf lettuce follows the same climate logic even though we introduced its cutting technique earlier. It is worth pausing here because many August failures happen before harvesting begins. Lettuce can germinate poorly in excessive heat, and young plants can bolt quickly when conditions remain hot. A packet labeled for fall does not override the temperature of the bed. In cooler areas, an August sowing may be necessary to establish plants before the season slows. In hot areas, later sowing may be more reliable. Temporary shade, a cooler seed starting location, and careful moisture management can bridge the transition. The goal is not to force the plant through unsuitable conditions simply because the month has arrived. The goal is to catch the window when the crop can establish and then benefit from cooling weather. When the plants are ready, use the same 2-stage approach. Thin crowded seedlings for the first handful of greens. Later, remove outer leaves from established loose-leaf plants. Keep the growing center and enough healthy foliage. If the plants begin stretching upward, producing a central stalk, or developing bitter leaves, they may be moving toward bolting. At that point, repeated outer leaf harvesting will not return them to an earlier stage. Use what remains and plan the next sowing for a cooler period. This climate section also changes how you should interpret every plant in the list. August in Maine is not August in Texas. A mountain garden, a coastal garden, and a city balcony surrounded by heat-holding walls can experience very different conditions on the same date. The correct question is not only, can this vegetable be planted in August? It is, does my location give this variety enough suitable weather to establish, recover from the first harvest, and complete the second stage? That question becomes even more important with the final crop. Spinach and lettuce can reward you at the baby leaf stage, even if the season shortens. Peas may also provide tender shoots, but pods require the plant to climb, flower, and finish a longer sequence. The first harvest must be especially restrained if you still expect the second. Peas belong on this list with a condition attached. In some regions, an August sowing can establish as temperatures begin to ease and produce a fall crop. In others, the remaining season is too short, the soil is still too hot, or early cold arrives before pods can mature. That does not make peas a bad choice. It means the decision must be based on your local calendar and the variety, not on the month printed in a video title. Start by identifying your average first frost date and the expected maturity range on the seed packet. Choose a variety suited to the season you have left. Then allow extra time because shortening days can slow growth. If the schedule is already tight on paper, removing shoots from the plants you hope will make pods is a poor trade. Pea seedlings may emerge close together, especially when seed is sown generously to compensate for uncertain germination. The first harvest can come from careful thinning. Select the strongest plants, preferably those positioned well for the trellis, and remove weaker or badly placed seedlings. If their roots are entangled, cut them at soil level rather than pulling against the plants you want to keep. Tender pea thinnings can be eaten as shoots. You can also harvest a small number of tender tips from vigorous plants, but understand what you are taking. The tip is not merely a leaf, it includes active growth that would otherwise extend the vine and create more nodes. Severe cutting may encourage branching on some plants, but it also consumes time and energy. In a fall crop with a limited window, time is often the resource you cannot replace. If pods are your priority, keep the shoot harvest conservative. Take thinnings first. Then allow the permanent plants to climb and build leaf area. Install support early so the tendrils can attach without the vines collapsing onto neighboring crops. A simple net, string trellis, or twig support is enough, but it should be in place before the vines become tangled. August heat can challenge peas at establishment. Keep the seed zone evenly moist, and consider temporary afternoon protection where the soil remains hot. Do not keep the bed waterlogged, because pea roots also need air. Once growth begins, check the vines regularly and guide loose tendrils toward the support. The second harvest requires more than green growth. The plants must reach flowering, set pods, and allow those pods to fill. A sudden hot period can reduce performance, and an early freeze can end the crop. This is why the promise must remain conditional. In a favorable fall, the first basket can hold pea thinnings or a few restrained shoots, and the second can hold pods. In a short or unpredictable fall, the shoots may be the safer main harvest. Gardeners in areas with mild winters may have a different planting window altogether. They may sow later than August or manage peas as a cool season crop through winter. Gardeners in cold regions may need to sow early in August, use a quick variety, and protect the crop as temperatures fall. The same plant belongs in different places on different calendars. Peas also reveal the central lesson of the entire video. Edible does not mean free. Every shoot, leaf, or seedling taken early changes the plant or the stand left behind. Sometimes that change is beneficial, as with thinning. Sometimes it is a manageable exchange, as with outer leaves. Sometimes it uses time and growth the crop cannot afford, as with aggressive shoot harvesting before a fall pod crop. So decide what success means before you cut. If your family values pea shoots and your season is uncertain, grow part of the planting specifically for shoots and leave another part untouched for pods. It is still one sowing, but the roles are clear. If pods are the priority, let most plants keep every healthy tip. The first basket should never be filled by borrowing so heavily from the second that nothing remains to harvest. We have now covered all 15 vegetables, but a list alone does not create a productive bed. The final step is to turn these crops into a practical plan that fits the space, climate, and harvest priorities of one real garden. Begin with your first frost date, current soil conditions, and the seed packets in your hand. Choose crops that can realistically complete the stage you value most. Radishes grown for roots have a different deadline from kale grown for leaves. Spinach may need a cooler sowing window, and peas need time for vines and pods. August starts the conversation, but your location finishes it. You do not need all 15 vegetables in one bed. Select a few from each harvest pattern, 1 or 2 for edible thinning, several reliable leafy crops, and perhaps one dual-purpose crop with a longer payoff. This creates variety without turning the bed into a crowded demonstration plot. In a raised bed, place taller crops where they will not shade shorter ones. Peas need a trellis. Kale, collards, and chard need room to spread. Use the middle for beets, turnips, kohlrabi, bok choy, and tatsoi, and the edges for radishes, green onions, mizuna, mustard, lettuce, or spinach. Containers follow the same logic. Use deep pots for beets or turnips, wide pots for leafy greens, and avoid crowding permanent kale, chard, or collard plants. Green onions can be harvested progressively around the edges. Plan for the space that remains after the first basket is removed. Label rows and containers so similar young brassicas are not confused. Keep the seed zone moist. Use temporary shade where heat threatens germination, and inspect seedlings before pests remove the leaves you hope to harvest. When seedlings appear, wait long enough to identify the strongest, but not until roots become hopelessly tangled. Keep upright, healthy plants in useful positions. Remove weak, damaged, or crowded seedlings first. If pulling threatens neighboring roots, cut at soil level, wash the thinnings, and place them in the first basket. Then step back and inspect the bed. The remaining plants should have a clear path toward their mature spacing. This is the moment when the first harvest improves the second. Air movement increases, leaves receive more light. Roots face less competition. The garden may look less full for a few days, but the emptier spaces are not lost production. They are room for the main crop to develop. As the leafy vegetables establish, begin selective harvesting. Take the oldest usable leaves from the outside. Protect the central growth. Harvest during a cool part of the day, and do not cut plants that are wilted, recently transplanted, heavily damaged, or struggling to establish. A modest first picking is better than an impressive basket followed by stalled growth. After each harvest, observe the response. Are new leaves expanding? Is color remaining strong? Is the plant holding itself upright? Has the root or kohlrabi stem begun to swell? Are pea vines extending toward the support? The answer determines whether you can harvest again or should pause. There must be a point when the first harvest slows. Stop treating permanent beets, turnips, radishes, and kohlrabi mainly as greens when you want roots or stems. Protect pea vines when pods are the goal, and leave enough foliage on lettuce and spinach. The second basket is built during the days when you choose not to cut. Keep moisture even while plants rebuild after harvest. Mulch can moderate the soil, but keep it away from tiny crowns. Check brassica leaves, tatsoi rosettes, and tender pea growth for pests, removing problems early so the plants retain enough healthy foliage to recover. Now picture the first basket. Beet and turnip thinnings, young radish tops, kohlrabi seedlings, slender green onions, baby mizuna, mustard, lettuce, spinach, and a limited number of outer leaves from bok choy, tatsoi, kale, collards, or chard. In the right garden, it may also contain pea thinnings. It represents the portion removed carefully or spared safely. Weeks later, the second basket looks different. Beets, turnips, and radishes have formed roots. Kohlrabi has built crisp stems. Bok choy and tatsoi are larger. Kale, collards, chard, and green onions have matured. Lettuce and spinach may continue in cooler weather, and where the calendar cooperates, pea vines carry pods. The two baskets will not be equal in every climate. A northern crop may run out of time. A southern gardener may delay sowing until heat breaks. A container garden may favor leaves over large roots. Success means preserving the best second stage your location can support, not forcing every crop onto one schedule. One planting does not automatically create two harvests. The second exists because the first was chosen carefully. You removed crowding without disturbing the strongest plants. You took outer leaves without cutting the living center. You left enough foliage to power roots, stems, leaves, and pods. And you stopped harvesting when the crop needed its energy for the next stage. That is the entire method in one sentence. Harvest what the plant can spare, protect what it needs to keep growing, and let the changing weather build the second basket. When you stand over a crowded August row, do not see plants that must be discarded. See two possible harvests and one decision. Which seedlings should feed you now? Which plants must remain? And which growing points must stay untouched? Answer those questions crop by crop, and one August sowing can continue feeding you through two very different stages of fall. Which of these vegetables will earn a place in your garden? And which first harvest have you been throwing away without realizing it?